made him a soldier. Conscience made him a man. Because only the human spirit can conquer the beast of war. Jason Patrick, Stephen Bauer, The Beast. Now on video cassette from RCA Columbia Pictures Home Video.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about one of our listener recommendations for the month, The Beast, or The Beast of War. They've changed the titles a little bit, but from 1988, Kevin Reynolds, who you know from like Robin Hood, the Robin Hood movies with Kevin Costner. He made Waterworld. He also co-wrote Red Dawn that we did earlier. So another war movie that he wrote. This was an interesting one. So our one of our listeners, Nick, reached out to us on Instagram and recommended us to watch this movie and said it's pretty much one of the most underrated 80s movies he thinks, which I could probably agree with him. I'd never heard of it, and it was a great recommendation. He ended up also following me on Letterboxd, which is cool. So he saw my rating on there, which that's a good rating for me. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I love when listeners give us recommendations, and that's what this month and this new year is dedicated to, is watching new movies. And we appreciate you guys listening and shooting over some recommendations. Jake, what'd you think of the movie?
It's really early, but I think this might be my favorite movie that we watched this year.
Whoa.
I love this movie.
Damn, I was expecting some negative critique right there.
No.
With that dramatic pause. Wow. Awesome. It's insanely well done. Mm-hmm. You've seen the movie Fury, right?
Yeah.
Did you like that movie? Did we see it together?
I think so. I honestly haven't watched it since it was in theaters, so I don't really remember much.
I didn't really care for that movie. This movie is like way better than Fury, if you ask me. But it has this, like, Fury took a lot of this inspiration, it feels like. But this movie is so original and so well done. I was blown away by it. Yeah, it's crazy. And our listener, Nick, sent us a lot of kind of behind the scenes on Instagram, which is cool. And I'm gonna read some of the stuff he said. But he reached out to us and was like, "Hey, just want to recommend this movie." And he stumbled across it a few years ago. Thought it was pretty amazing. Someone who else really loves the film is Roger Avery, who you mentioned in one of our other interviews or reviews.
Him and Tarantino have a podcast where they talk about like really obscure movies.
Yeah, so apparently him and Tarantino went and saw the movie in Westwood, California on opening weekend, and no one was there. They had the theater to themselves. The owner said that the theater it was only in the theater for one day just for awards qualifications. And then they, obviously suppressed the film. So Nick had actually slid into Roger Avery's DMs and he got back to him. Which is super cool.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, Nick. Like the talk about suppressing a film for reasons of political agenda. Same thing happened with Idiocracy, which is also a fantastic movie. Have you ever seen that movie, Jake?
I don't think I've seen it all the way through.
Oh, it's so good.
But I know what it is.
Yeah, it's so good. So he Roger Avery loves this film, and then he sent over a couple articles, which I briefly read through, that I'll get to among this this episode. So the Soviet Union invaded landlocked Afghanistan in 1978. That campaign lasted 8 years and killed nearly 15,000 Russians and more than 80,000 Afghans. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know about this. Did you know about this?
Yeah, I knew a little bit about about it. I looked into it a little bit more just so I could be a little bit more intelligent when I talked about it. But the like official story is that the socialist Afghani government was dealing with an uprising by the Mujahideen, who are like these kind of like disparate rebels that, you know, live primarily in the countryside of Afghanistan. Were just kind of fed up with the way that the socialist government was kind of running things. The government requested, this is the official story, that the government requested the Soviet Union intervene and assist them in like stabilizing the country. I read that they sent the request 20 times before the Soviet Union actually responded to them and said, like, fine, we'll help you. I don't know how true that is. Like, historically speaking, Afghanistan has been, like, highly prized territory because it's, although a lot of it's very desolate, it's very resource rich in, like, minerals and oil and other things. So it is actually like a very like highly prized region. And like, I think even before the Russian occupation in 79, it was referred to as like the graveyard of empires because most conquering groups would end up failing or being run out at some point because it's extremely difficult to control. It's very mountainous. There's not a whole lot of like urban centers. It's a lot of very like tribal, disparate kind of groups of people. There's a very long history of like warlord kind of like control in different territories. So
yeah,
it's very, very, very difficult to actually like get some kind of like unifying control over the country, which I think this movie portrays like extremely well.
Yeah,
in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, definitely. So, did you read any of the articles I kind of briefly sent you, or no?
I read the one about the author of the original play, which is pretty wild.
So, I mean, he did his research for sure. So, William Mastro Simone, potentially, if that's how you pronounce his last name. He was a playwright and just became obsessed with this war and went over to Afghanistan and basically, like, you talked about a warlord and how they oversee like certain territories. Like, he became face to face with one to make sure he could like enter this territory, and just like shot the shit with the guy and thought he was really cool. Little did he know that this guy was like
one of the worst people
like throwing acid in people's faces and stuff. But he's like, other than that, nice guy, you know? And then I don't know, like one time he was, I kind of skimmed through it a little bit in certain areas, but like he basically was left stranded by his like guide and was like left for dead basically. And this nearby like small village came and rescued him and basically like helped him out and nursed him back to health just because they were just like the nicest people. And he was just like, that's such a different side of the war, and that's what he wrote about. Nanawati or Nanawati or however they pronounced it. It's, you know, that's like mercy. That's what he was shown, and that's the play he wrote about. And then Kevin Reynolds saw this play and was like, "Hey, William, I want to make this a movie," and they did. It had an $8 million budget, and it made absolutely no money. I mean, it made according to IMDb, it made $161,000.
Yeah,
that's
which is like really, really bad.
Yeah, it was pretty much shelved. And also at the time, one of our favorites, Sylvester Stallone, was trying to make Rambo 3, which takes place in Afghanistan. So they much preferred that because it was a bankable star and it was, a bankable franchise. And they're like, we're just going to go with this one and we're going to basically shelve and like let this wither out for the beast, which is disappointing. But however, this, like most of the movies we talk about on here, it's gotten cult status. But I mean, this is like the cult of the cult statuses, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I'm sure more people from the 80s and like 90s know about it more than like our generation for sure. But it's definitely, I mean, I would almost say it's a masterpiece. It's done so well.
I mean, there's just like every aspect of it is just so well crafted. Like there's like a few ways you can knock it. Like, I think everybody in the movie is American, even though they're portraying Russians and Afghanis. But like, whatever, it's the 80s. But like,
they did that on purpose, though. He put them as Americans so that the audience would like relate to them and see them. And like, I like that it's disorienting for sure. And Kevin Reynolds talks about how he made that decision, and it's disorienting for the first like 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, and then you get used to it.
Yeah.
Which I like that they did that. I mean, and it's not like they have like fake Russian accents or anything like that. They're just straight up speaking English and American accents.
Yeah, I appreciate that they didn't do the entire movie in subtitles.
Yeah,
that was nice. But like the writing is impeccable, despite the cultural inaccuracy, if you want to call it that, with the casting. But I mean, like there's elements of like all kinds of like great war movies, like Apocalypse Now. Like you can kind of see influences, Full Metal Jacket, which we've talked about, the like kind of like nihilism of fighting in a war, but also that like very like human kind of story that's attached to like a very unhuman like circumstance, and that it's just balanced so well between those two states.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, what do you think about the acting? Like Jason Patric, he's well known, but he's not super well known. I mean, like, he's not an A-lister by any means. Mm-hmm. You got George Dzunda, who's great. What'd you think of like the casting and everything?
I liked everybody.
Stephen
I thought
Bauer
everybody
awesome.
did, an amazing job.
It's
just like there's like I was just like so engrossed in watching this, like the whole time. Like I was kind of like, like I've talked about this before. I hate subtitles, so like I was expecting it to be like tedious to like be reading and stuff, but like I couldn't look away. It was so good.
Damn, that's awesome, dude. Hell
like,
yeah!
I had to. I watched it in the basement because I figured it was a war movie. It was going to be loud, so I didn't want to wake up my daughter or anything. And like 5 minutes in, I was like noticing a glare, and I was like pissed that I had to pause the movie and like go shut all the lights off. So I didn't want to stop watching.
Damn, dude, that's great. I love to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Jason Patric, in my opinion, I like him. I've always liked him. There's two parts where his acting kind of bothered me, and it's where he's on the rock, like, and he's like strung up on the rock, and he's like crying, like, because they're leaving him, and like that acting was like a little over the top, in my opinion, just a little bit. And then when he has the RPG and he like throws it at the tank, I was like, all right, dude, like it's a little bit overacting in my opinion, just on those two instances. But the rest of it was so awesome. And like George Dzunda is as the captain in this, as Doskel, was incredible.
Yeah, so good.
Like, in fucking incredible. And apparently he like campaigned to get this role and lost 50 pounds because he's a big dude and he's been in a lot of like comedy movies, which is crazy. He lost 50 pounds for the role and got it, obviously. He's in Basic Instinct. I mean, he's in a lot of great movies. Crimson Tide, The Deer Hunter. I mean, he's in a ton of great classics. And he's a very good character actor. Stephen Baldwin is pretty decent, one of the Baldwin brothers in this. Don Harvey's awesome in this. And then you get Stephen Bauer, who is like a Cuban and like half Jewish actor, and he plays an Afghani, which is hilarious. And all I think about is Scarface with him. He is awesome in this.
Yeah.
He's fucking awesome in this. And it's funny, a lot of the Afghanis in this movie are actually played by Israelis, from what I read. And this movie was shot in Israel.
Yep.
So pretty interesting. I mean, it's so well done, and like I mean, it starts off right off the bat with the tank destroying this village, which is crazy, and you're just like, holy shit! Like, it's so raw and feels so real, and that's why it sucks you in my opinion. It's just like,
what kind of blew me away is,
pun intended,
like to like touch on your comment about the realism is like there is 0% bullshit in this movie.
Yeah.
They're actually driving a fucking tank like through the desert and shit, and like they're like some of the shots in this movie are like crazy. Like the like circular shots around the tank as it's like driving through the desert is so cool, and like they do it like 2 or 3 times, which is like just so awesome. And like shows you like the vast expanse of like the wilderness that they're like actually driving this tank through. Like, it's nuts. And like, it's just like, I think that's one of the reasons why it like pulled me in, is just like there is nothing to like remove you from the like reality that they're building in this movie, you know?
Yeah. And what's interesting is like, you say how it's like the way it's shot and how it's this vastness of this wilderness, of this desert, and they only have they go the wrong way, and it's a cul-de-sac, and it's crazy that how it's shot with that in mind. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like they feel so isolated and alone, and it's cool because, I mean, you have these Russians that don't know anything about the environment they're in, and then you have these Afghanis going after them, taking shortcuts and stuff, and that's very much like the Vietnam War, and then, you know, our future war of you know, like when we invade Afghanistan in 2001.
That's the other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, is like this movie feels like it could have been made in like 2008 about the American invasion. Like the relevance, like if you took all the references away to Russia, like there's like not much of a difference. And it's kind of crazy to think about that.
So funny you say that, because after 9/11 happened in the US, the film was removed from all cable networks like HBO, Cinemax, and others that were airing the film, despite the fact that information was still out there about the film. Coincidentally, 2001 was also the year the film made its DVD debut, and was also pulled by Sony due to the film's setting, Afghanistan, and also was a true story that there was a war between Russia and Afghanistan in the early 80s, in which the film is based on. So they felt it was inappropriate, so they basically like shelved it again, and like hindered its relevance again, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, and like that's a lot of people I think don't realize this, but you know, this movie's about the Mujahideen, which are these basically rebels fighting against the Soviet Union, right? A lot of people don't know that the CIA was heavily involved in training and supplying the Mujahideen. which turned around and bit us in the ass later.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who ended up attacking us on 9/11.
Yeah.
Via Osama bin Laden. But, yeah, who was directly trained by the CIA. And a lot of people don't know that. So it is interesting to watch this movie with that knowledge and the you know, for this movie, future context of the American invasion of Afghanistan, to be like, it's a little surreal being like prompted to root for the guys that you know are going to
I know
after us in the future.
It's very interesting.
But yeah, I mean, at the time, like, there was, like, it would have been unquestionable that the Soviet Union was in the wrong, and these guys were like, I mean, even the in the article from the guy who wrote the original play said that, like, these guys reminded him of, like, George Washington and his troops, you know, like fighting against this, like, imperial power or whatever. So, like, it's very, like, it was a very surreal experience, but, like, very, very interesting one watching this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's crazy to think that. I mean, we talk about how movies stand the test of time and if they hold up or not. This movie definitely holds up, especially for us Americans. But again, like you said, it's hard to, like, root for the people we know are bad guys in the future. I mean, granted, they're not bad guys at this time, so it's like, I guess you got to have some, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
relevance.
The parallels are undeniable, and, like, you can watch this movie as like a like foreshadowing or like a like preemptive warning of, like, what we shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
You know, a couple decades later. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. And, like, the suppression of the movie is pretty wild.
Yeah, very wild. Yeah, I want to go back to, like, the opening of just, like, this village getting destroyed, and then, like, all these people getting killed, and then, like, the Russians killing, like, the sheep, which is crazy, just, like, no remorse, no regard for any type of life. And then you get them running over, like, one of the guys in the village, which is a crazy scene. Like, watching its feet fucking get squished. Ugh, it's gnarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's like you feel for this village and these Afghanis that are getting, you know, displaced and fucked up. But then you get the shots of the tank starting up. That is like the epitome of the movie, in my opinion. It's just like all these different shots of the tank starting, and, like, it just is so realistic and so well done. The tank was used in the film was an authentic Soviet T-55 tank. So it was a real Soviet tank. The IDF captured it during the Arab-Israeli conflicts, although it was modified by the Israelis and redesignated as a TI-67 and fitted with a 105mm main gun in place of the original 100mm gun. The film's military advisor, Dale Dye, said that he negotiated the purchase of the tanks over drinks with Israeli defense forces in a Tel Aviv hotel. Like, that's so fucking pimp. Just, like, just negotiated with over drinks. That's so cool. Then you get that crazy cool scene of the misfire, like multiple misfires where they think the tank's going to explode. That's crazy. And then, so for added realism, 90mm blank shells were modified to fire the weight of water of the tank's 105mm cannons, thus causing the cannon to recoil as if it had fired a live shell. So, like, you have that real recoil, which is really cool. Just, again, the level of craft going into this film was definitely awesome. I also want to talk about how this is, like, it's regardless of the Russians and Afghanis in this movie, it's a David versus Goliath story.
Yeah.
And they even have that like the one holy man with the fire who's like, I lit the way for you with these tracks, and like calls the guy David, because it's I mean it's very on the nose, saying, oh yeah, it's like David and Goliath, Goliath being the tank. I think that's cool, and that's a very relatable story, and makes you root for David in this story. So it's universal as well.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was gonna say. And like the different little, like, I don't know if you want to call them like vignettes of like these kind of like mishaps that the tank crew kind of like encounter or endure are like really essential in like leveling the playing field between the Mujahideen and the tank crew, because like the tank crew should have no problem like wiping these guys out, but like they have these misfires, and their equipment keeps malfunctioning. They have to contend with the environment, which is brutal and taxing on the vehicle. All this different stuff, like slowly like wearing them down, and like kind of destroying their will. Which is really, really great writing, and a great way to create stakes and kind of flesh out the otherwise what should be like a very straightforward story.
Yeah, it adds drama for sure. It
Yeah.
adds stakes. And I like that you have Kaminsky, Don Harvey's character. He's like drinking the brake fluid that he like fermented with like sugar and like raisins, and like it tastes like alcohol, which apparently I read that is probably true. That's what it would taste like, is like somewhat have the hint of alcohol, which is crazy. It just adds to like, I don't know, the survival instincts and like the wages of war for sure. Mm-hmm. I like the interpreter that's with them, Namad, I believe is his name, or Samad, mm-hmm. And like I like when Korvachenko, Jason Patrick's character, is like talking to him, and he's like playing chess, and they're like, he's the only one that really respects Samad, and he talks about Nanawati and Badal and all that, like revenge and mercy, and he's like, I'm like, oh, like that's also good writing. The Nanawati is setting that up for later in the film, because that's coming, and it's just it was good writing if you ask me. It's crazy when the captain kills Samad in the water. He's like, hey, go and like tell me how deep this water is, and then shoots him in the back, which is just a villainous thing to do, mm-hmm. and completely messed up.
And like is really like the first real like glaring hint that he's starting to like lose it, and that's where like that like Apocalypse Now kind of like influence, I think, comes in, where like you have the like commander that's slowly like losing his grip, and like his only focus becomes the mission, and like everything else is expendable.
Yeah, and it even shows when they're like about to get rescued by the helicopter, and he's like, no, we're just no.
Give me some fuel, we'll make it back. And like the other two are like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Yeah. And then you get the captain ties up Jason Patrick, Korvachenko's character, and they like all these booby traps they leave behind are pretty intense and like crazy, with like the poison in the water. Mm-hmm. The grenade under the misfired shell. They put a grenade under Korvachenko's head, which he uses to kill a dog, which I hate. But it saves his life, so I get it. I didn't like that part specifically, but it's a movie. It's fake. But yeah, and then he's about to get stoned to death by the women, who the women are great in this movie. How they're like, they just want their revenge. And then he says Nanawati, and they spare his life, which is crazy. And then, in exchange, they're giving him food, and then he fixes the RPG for them and kind of, creates an alliance with them. And that whole scene in the cave is awesome. And then I like one of my favorite scenes is when they see that the tank is coming back and has to go through the pass, and Stephen Bauer's character like does that visual aid and draws in the sand of like the tank going through back through the pass, and they're like, oh, we can take a shortcut. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that was executed, written, and directed like perfectly, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Like,
and like that's, I think that might be the last time that there's like subtitles.
Oh.
Like for like communication. I mean, there probably are, but it's not like as subtitle heavy as it is earlier in the movie, where like a lot of their communication becomes like gestural and like, you know, like simple words and phrases, you know, that they can kind of understand, which I think is also really good writing. Yeah, I loved Constantine's character arc is like phenomenally done. Like starting out with him almost being like the rising star in the team, you know, until he like his conscience, you know, kind of, you know, gets him in trouble. And then like, you know, to being abandoned, to deciding he wants revenge, you know, is really great. And like it just very well crafted. There's great, like you said, the Nanawati, you know, comes full circle, you know, and saves his life. You know, being the only one that cared about the interpreter, you know, ends up being a benefit to him. There's just a lot of really good writing points.
Yeah. And then you get the ending where he shoots the rocket at the tank and, you know, blows up the muzzle basically, and then the women drop rocks on it, and like immobilizing it, which is cool. Again, they get their revenge, and then they end up stoning the captain to death basically, but letting the other two guys go, which I didn't want them to die, the other two guys, because like they're like somewhat innocent but not, and it's like
they're just like clowns kind of. They
Yeah.
don't know what's going on.
they're just casualties of war in
Yeah.
terms of like, you know, just following orders.
Yeah.
But I mean, that doesn't excuse anything. But yeah, pretty interesting. Then you get the ending where he's just like, it's another like realistic moment of reality where Stephen Bauer's character's like, "Yo, Constantine, come on, like join us," and he's just like, "No, I'm gonna go back, and like I'm gonna get picked up by the helicopter." And you think he's gonna like explain everything that happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you?
It's an interesting ending. I think again that's a full circle moment where like at one point the commander says, yeah, like his flaw is that he thinks for himself, which is I think double-sided, where like he's, you know, on one hand he is an independent thinker and he's, you know, questioning the authority of the commander, but I think it has a double meaning also that he's looking out for himself.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes full circle in the end where he's like, yeah, I'm like gonna go back to Russia and like, you know, save my ass. Like,
Yeah.
like it's been fun, but like, no, I'm not going to live in the Afghan wilderness with you guys, you know?
Yeah. Pretty interesting. So you like the ending?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, like, I think it's befitting of a war movie that he's kind of like, you know, see ya, I'm out of here, you know, like it's
Yeah.
not like a happy
realistic.
ending. It's
Yeah.
a realistic ending.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I am shocked that this is our first movie of the year, and you're already claiming it might be the best. I'm shocked. That's awesome, though. I love that. That's really good to hear. I can't claim it that early. It's really good. It's definitely
Yeah.
high on the list. And I hope everyone enjoyed our last episode with our recap of 2024 and our favorite movies and our not so favorite movies. That was a really fun episode, and I really like fan involvement and listener involvement. So, Nick, again, we appreciate you shouting out this movie and recommending this movie for us.
Yeah. Awesome recommendation.
Awesome recommendation, agreed. So, yeah, send us another one if you want. I'll send him the link to this episode when it comes out. And and then next week we've got another recommendation from Steve, another guy who slid into our DMs on Instagram and recommended us another Michael J. Fox film, Midnight Madness, which we both have never seen. Again, kind of continuing that trend, which is awesome. I'm looking forward to that movie next week as well.
Yeah, another one that I know nothing about, and I aims to keep it that way.
Same. I definitely, I'm definitely going into that blind as well. So, we appreciate you guys listening and sending us over some recs. Keep them coming. We definitely enjoyed this one, and we'll catch you next week.
Yep. See you.